Welcome, viewers and listeners, to the Thinking Fans Premier League podcast. Each week, we get together with our besties who are current pro players, real coaches, academics, and stat heads. Today, we're joined by soccer analyst Harshal Patel and professional footballer Dre Fortune. I'm host Chris Mumford. Bella Ciao. We're sponsored by the Premier League Guide, a 300-page book for those mad about football. Moneyball for football, opposition analysis plus eye candy. The next available update is on www.thinkingfanmedia.com and on Amazon. Over the coming weeks, we'll be transitioning to the Thinking Fan Football Club podcast platform on your favorite podcast, as well as on YouTube. This week, we review several matches, and we take a hard look at some of the lower league table teams and try to do some sense making. We also chat about surprises and what we're expecting going forward. We preview several matches as well. Harshal, why don't we jump right into the Wolves-West Brom game? Probably didn't get too much fanfare amongst the traditional pundits, but seemed to be very important to both teams.
Yeah, and it was probably a lot more entertaining than many people thought it would be. It was the first Black Country derby in a long time, and this is again quite a passionate affair for fans of both the clubs. And obviously, we couldn't have that in the stadium, but both managers had spoken about how this is much more than just a match for fans of both these clubs, and in obviously also because it is a derby, but also because of their positions in the table and what a win could mean for both teams. And it ended up 3-2 to West Brom, who've picked up their first win under Allardyce, and only the second time they've had any points. The only other points they've had under him was in his first game in charge, where they drew against Liverpool. But not really talking about the game as such, but it's been interesting to see how Wolves have really struggled this season. And I say interesting from the point of view that I've been a little. I think the best word is sad, because they've been one of my favorite teams since they came up. And yes, it's not your typical rags to riches story or a fairy tale story, because they are bankrolled by a sort of conglomerate, a Chinese conglomerate, and they do have money, and their links with Jorge Mendes have meant that they've picked up some amazing players who, you wouldn't really have thought would be playing for Wolves, the likes of Ruben Neves, Joao Moutinho, Raul Jimenez. So there is, I'm not saying that they're sort of a fairy tale club, but they've still done a very good job with regard to Nuno and the coaching staff and the playing staff over the last 2 years. And they've been Europa League contenders at least, but this season at the moment around the halfway mark, they're in 14th place. I don't think they'll be in relegation trouble. I think that they're around 10 points clear of that place. But this season is so tight that maybe 2-3 bad results in the next 4-5 games could sort of pull them back down. So we'll have to wait and see. But they're struggling to score. They're really struggling to score goals. They've scored 21 goals in 19 games, which is hardly anything. And Raul Jimenez's absence is a big reason for that, but they're also not really creating too many chances at the same time. Even though Nuno has gone to a back four to try and get a little more attacking intent and a little more creativity into the team. They do have good players, but they're really struggling at the moment. So I feel for them. I feel for that Wolves team.
Dre, any impressions on either Wolves or West Brom?
Speaking for Wolves, obviously they've shown, like Harshal said, they've been competing for Europa League places over the last couple of years. But they only have one win in their last, I think, 9 Premier League games, stretching back to the beginning of December. And with their schedule coming up, they've got Chelsea, Arsenal, Leicester, Southampton. These are going to be tough fixtures for them. So if they don't pick up points, in the next few games coming up, I think it's going to be. I don't expect them to be in a relegation battle, but I think it's going to be pretty tough for them. And then as for West Brom, obviously, we know what it is. Every year there's those 4 or 5 teams that are fighting to kind of keep their way in the Premier League, and West Brom's definitely struggling right now, and I think it's probably going to be a tough road ahead for the rest of the season.
Yeah, I tell you, for I do a double take when I look at Wolves. You know, they're at a -9 goal differential. -8. And I don't know what's worse, the 29 goals conceded, which puts them around 15th or 16th place in terms of goals allowed, or only 21 goals scored, which puts them probably in equal stead. And so I'm hopeful that they go out in the January transfer market and pick up. We've talked about them going after Diego Costa, which I think would be a good fit. Whether his legs are fit enough to play in the Premier League again, time will tell on that. West Brom, not sure what to say. It'll be interesting to see if Sam Allardyce can work his magic. He is basically taking a championship level team and trying to keep them in the Premier League, while his other save jobs, they were Premier League players where he was able to save them. So we'll keep our fingers crossed on West Brom. Let's turn our attention to the Leicester Southampton game. Both of these teams came in well rated. Harshal, what's your take on how that game progressed?
I think Southampton are going to struggle over the next few weeks, because you can really see the lack of depth in their squad now with the injuries that they're getting, and the fact that Ralph Hasenhüttl is having to play the academy kids, because he really doesn't have anybody else at the club. So, I mean, one of the guys who came in for this game, Will Smallwood, who is an academy graduate, but he has played a fair bit of football for Southampton before, and he's very highly regarded at the club. He's now picked up an ACL injury, so he's going to be out for a while. And I mean, he'd only come into the team because somebody else was injured. So that's where they're going to struggle. But I wouldn't say the only issue, but one of the biggest issues with Southampton is that if everyone is fit, they're a very good side. They can give anybody else in the league a run for their money. But as much as Hasenhüttl has done a very good job in terms of putting out a very sort of well-defined style of play and a set formation, set tactics, which make it easy for players to come in. Also because they've sort of, their under-23 team is more of a B team in that sense, because they play in the same exact tactics and formation and shape and sort of strategy as the first team, to allow the youngsters to be able to step up seamlessly into the first team if and when they're needed. So that is great, but it's still, I mean, they're still kids, 18, 19, 20-year-old kids who've not really had too much Premier League experience, top flight experience elsewhere, who are being asked to do a job against seasoned Premier League campaigners. So that is where they're going to struggle. And I mean, I would have thought that they might have been able to challenge for Europa League, maybe Champions League at a stretch, but I mean, a Europa League spot is still not out of the question, because they're only 4 points away from 5th place. But I think where they are in the table right now, 8th, is more or less their natural level. As for Leicester, again, extremely impressive. I've spoken about this earlier as well, that I have been very impressed with the job that Brendan Rodgers has done. He's getting players back now. Timothy Castagne is back. Johnny Evans has been playing for the last couple of games, especially in defense, which is where they've been losing, where they've lost players over the course of the season. Now they're getting those guys back, and the creativity looks like it's getting there. Again, I'd spoken about this in earlier episodes, where it seemed as though they were struggling for creativity, but I thought they did well in this match. They created chances. James Maddison was brilliant for his goal. Harvey Barnes was absolutely clinical, and both of these guys are now showing a goal scoring touch, especially with Barnes, which means that they're not as reliant on Jamie Vardy. So, I mean, they're up to 3rd place. They're level with City on points, even though City have played a game less. So, who knows? They could be a dark horse. I mean, forget they could be. They probably are right in in contention for a Champions League spot this year.
Trey, what are your impressions?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to deny Leicester and what they've been doing over the past few years, but they've shown themselves well this year as well. I mean, they've beaten City, they've beaten Arsenal, they've beaten Spurs, they tied Man U, so they do very well against the other top teams, and they're having their successes against the lower teams as well. So I think they're going to be everyone's talking about Liverpool and Man U up at the top, but Leicester's going to be comfortably in the top 4 for me at the end of this year. And then Southampton as well. I think they've kind of found their level, like Harshal said. I think it was always going to be tough when you look at depth and depth of squad and, the schedule that they had and whatnot. So they got off to a really good start, and now hopefully they can just kind of get out of this slump and maintain some consistency to finish out the season.
Yeah, I think my take on Leicester is as long as Vardy stays healthy, everything's going to be in good shape. And I'd actually say Southampton's in the same boat too. As long as Ings stays healthy, they're going to be in good shape. But that's just not going to happen, I think, in this season. So how are they going to be able to weather the storm? How are the goals going to be able to get replaced? And I'm trying to find, as you guys know, I'm a big fan of Giroud, and I'm trying to find a home where he gets the full 90 minutes that he deserves. And, I could easily see him immediately helping a Southampton when Ings is injured, or it'd be interesting to see the two of them play. But I'm not sure that Lampard is going to want to give away his Giroud security blanket, as I think Inter is coming and Juve are coming at him fairly aggressively as well. So it's one of those fragile stories with both Leicester and Southampton. So we'll just kind of see how that progresses over the coming weeks. All right, let's turn our attention to what was billed as the game of the week, the game of the month, possibly the game of the season, Liverpool, Man United. Dre, give us your take on that game.
Sorry, did you say me?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
It kind of cut out a little bit. Oh, sorry. Okay, yeah. So obviously there's a lot of hype and build up to the game, and the two teams both at the top of the table, and everyone's looking forward to an energetic and exciting match. But I think it, particularly in the first half, it really let us down. I mean, Liverpool obviously was going to dominate the ball and possession, I think, and kind of force the issue a little bit. And it was a struggle for them. I mean, they had a few half chances here and there, but I didn't think there was anything truly clear cut for them to have opportunities on goal. And I think by the end of the game, Man U really ended up with the opportunities to win the game. I mean, Bruno had a cutback from Luke Shaw kind of late on into the game, which, I mean, yes, it's a good save from Alisson, but I think any other day Bruno does a little bit better there to put that in the corner and get a little bit more power behind it and finish. Pogba probably had the chance of the game. That was a brilliant save from Alisson, in my opinion. So, he really did well to keep him out. And, when you look at it, I think, for me, I think this game shows how good Liverpool really is, because they started the game without a natural center back. They started the game with two defensive midfielders at center back, and were still able to put out, a decent performance against a Manchester United team who's been playing well over recent weeks. And for me, in my opinion, I think Man U is happier with the tie than Liverpool might be at the end of the day. So yeah, I mean, Liverpool's slipped down the table a little bit again. They're in fourth now, and Man U's at the top. City's obviously got a game in hand, so they're going to try to hold that at the top. Who knows if that'll last? I think City's going to probably win their game in hand and be up top. But yeah, I think all in all, I think it was a bit disappointing, that game for me.
Harshal, what was your take on them? And really, is Man United a legitimate contender to win the Premier League this year?
I'll answer the second question first. Again, 10 games from here, if it's a similar sort of situation, I said this last week as well, 3-4 points in it, United maybe in second, third, but the gap is around 3 to 5 points, then probably yes. We are at the halfway stage, but it's still too early to tell, I think. And also, again, because this season has been such a weird one, you don't know what can happen over the next couple of months in terms of injuries to, either United's players or other clubs, and the sort of impact that can have on the results that they'll get. So that does obviously mean that, luck is going to be a huge factor here. But at the moment, United do look like they're going to be there and there or thereabouts when the season ends. In terms of being a contender, probably will end up in the top four. How far off they'll be from the title or whether they'll win the title, we'll have to see. With regard to this game, yeah, it did turn into a bit of defense versus attack, and it was almost quite similar to a classic Jose Mourinho performance. Almost actually quite similar to how Spurs played against Liverpool at Anfield, and they almost picked up a win, but obviously they didn't. And similar, a little bit similar here, where in the first half, I mean, there was I thought United had very little ambition in terms of attacking, or at least in terms of holding the ball, playing and trying to put together a bit of possession spells and then attacking. It was all counter attack, which has worked for Solskjaer, but I think there was something off, because, I mean, look at the number of times Rashford was caught offside, and that's the sort of thing that you don't expect to happen too often if you're on the top of your game, because especially with someone like Rashford, who is pretty quick. He was playing at centre forward and with Martial on the left rather than the other way around, which is how they've played for the majority of the season. And you would think that with Fabinho and Henderson as the centre backs, he would be sort of relishing his chances of being able to get a run on them. And so, I mean, he could probably give them half a yard as well, when starting his run, because he is quicker than both of them. So I was really surprised by the number of times he was caught offside, especially in the first half. And that tells me that there's something missing at the moment in terms of the attack clicking. And that can happen, I think, with the number of games that you play. Your fitness levels and sharpness mentally can be a bit of a problem. And as Ray said, in the second half, United actually had the two big chances. It was a good save from Alisson for the first one from Fernandes. I thought the second one, again, a good save from Alisson, but Pogba just needed to have a little bit more composure. He basically smashes it at Alisson. If he just tried to place it into the corner, it would have been a much more difficult save. I'm not saying Alisson wouldn't have made the save, but it would have been much more difficult.
Let me interrupt there. Dre, in those moments, are you thinking, instead of smash, let me place in the corner? I mean, what when the pedal's to the metal, what are you thinking in there? Or are you thinking at all?
I mean, yeah, I say, to be honest, me, I like to cut that there, and just cut the defender and then kind of square up a little bit. But I don't know. In those moments, especially at that level, I think he's got to be a little bit more composed in that situation. And because I think if he puts that either side of Alisson, it's probably a goal, especially at that power. But I think he just kind of maybe a little bit of panic and just kind of snapped at his shot. And I don't know why. I mean, his first touch looked good. It looked like he put it where he wanted it. But obviously, at those levels, everything happens so quickly, and defenders are on you quickly and whatnot. So yeah, I kind of agree, though. I think he could have been a little more composed.
Well, I've said this on previous podcasts. I love when people that hit the ball hit it as hard as they can, because more times than not, it's probably over the bar and I don't have to do any work, or it hits me in the chest or something. It's the ones that dink it to the left or right of me, and I only have about 7 yards or 8 yards or 12 yards reaction time. And it's just like, man, I don't like that bet. I will say that Alisson, I am shocked that he did not win player of the match, because those saves there, what you expect out of a great keeper are some routine work, a couple of easy saves, and then one or two is just like, how did that happen? Right. And I just look at Alisson in terms of physique, and it's like, that guy's not a top keeper. But then when you see the way he performs is really magnificent. So hats off to him. Other observations. Did I misread this? I saw Salah on the left and Mane on the right a lot. And usually I'm used to them seeing them in opposite roles. And I'm just kind of curious to see if we could tease out what the psychology, or why did that happen? Any thoughts on that?
I mean, yeah, we did see that happen quite a bit. And I mean, we saw Xherdan Shaqiri start for the first time in over a year. It was his first start in the Premier League in 13 months. So that was a bit of a sort of curveball, which I don't think many people saw Jurgen Klopp,
Yeah.
throwing. And
Go ahead.
yeah, I think it was just a case of maybe trying to get a little more creativity in the side, because you had Thiago in midfield as well, and he bossed the game, no doubt. And I mean, his quality is there for everyone to see. But I thought Shaqiri had a good game as well, and it might just have been a case of maybe having Salah and Mane playing on their natural sides, in the sense that the left-footed player on the left and the right-footed on the right, to maybe have a little bit more width, to then allow Shaqiri, Firmino, if he's dropping deep from the sort of United backline, to have a little bit more space, and then they could move into make those sort of diagonal runs. Maybe that was the thinking behind that, and yeah, I think that was the case.
Dre, any thoughts on that? I mean, how often are players shifting things up for different looks and things like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a quote unquote normal thing. I mean, probably just it could be a tactical thing, like Harshal said. Probably try to get more width. Could be psychological. I mean, these teams and these players have these same matchups all the time, so it could be just to give the defender something fresh and something new to look at as well. Because I mean, the amount of time Salah's gone up against Luke Shaw, it's ridiculous. So yeah, it could be anything really.
Yeah. Well, I found that interesting. I found it interesting that because the two center midfielders were playing as backs, that Klopp put in some creativity, the Shaqiri as well as Thiago, with the hopes that, I really think this isn't so much that the top three of Liverpool performed poorly. I actually think Man U's defense played magnificently. I mean, they absolutely owned the air. And I'm not talking about winning the first header. I'm talking about the second balls that get a little bit loose. Mane or Salah just didn't have much to work with at all, right? So if they had fussed up something, they could pick up on that. And clearly they feast off of playing off the second ball. But I really thought that Man U's defense, that's really to me the highlight of the game. So yeah, I guess Liverpool, the top three, needs to figure out how to beat teams like that. But the truth is this: those top three need to figure out how to beat the mid and the bottom table teams to win the league, right? They don't, and you want to at least win a few more of the top 5 or 6 if your objective is to win the league. And so I say hats off to Man United. I do think that they did park the heck out of the bus. Everybody seemed like they were below 35 most of the time, though Rashford did his level best to try to create a little bit of stress amongst the back line. But, those instances were not capitalized on. So not sure there's too much to glean out of that. I do think that I still think Liverpool is the favorite along with Man City. I think your assessment is spot on, Harshal. And, I don't think we should make any more of it than we can, because there are 20 matches to play and there are injuries that we don't even know about, in COVID and all these other things. So time will tell on that. Let's turn our attention to the team that seems to be sneaking up the table, even though they've got a $750 million in terms of transfer fees, Man City, and how they just dismantled Crystal Palace. Harshal, any quick notes on that match?
I mean, it's not too often that you see John Stones score 2 goals. I mean, I don't think it's too often that you see him score a goal at all. He scored 2 in this game. The 4 goals were pretty, I think, I mean, if you just look at the 4 goals in isolation, you don't really get a sense of City's creativity, other than the first goal, which I thought, I mean, that cross from De Bruyne was absolutely brilliant. The touch before that to set the ball where he wanted it, and then to get that sort of spin and dip with the outside of his right foot right onto Stones' head. I mean, I don't think anybody in the world could have missed the header from that sort of delivery that De Bruyne put for him. So that is obviously a brilliant example to show what De Bruyne can do in terms of helping, create chances for City. But the other goals were a deflection, and then a pass from a corner, which was Stones' second goal and the third goal of the game. Sterling scored a brilliant free kick, and Gundogan scored another one in the top corner. Those two were literally went into the same sort of postage stamp area, which I think if you would ask a midfielder or a striker where they want to score a goal, they would literally pick that area out of the goal, and both those goals were placed there. So they were, I mean, that's just the point I'm trying to make here is that the goals themselves were probably outliers or examples of very low probability events, but City did create a lot of chances. It's a good thing because they've actually, in their last two games against Crystal Palace at the Etihad, they've not done well. I think they'd lost the last two games against Palace at the Etihad. So it was a little bit of a banana skin, which they sort of obviously managed to deal with really well here. I think Gundogan has been extremely, he's been very, very good over the last month and a half or so. He's been playing as a bit more advanced role. And I think the fact that Pep has been able to put Fernandinho in midfield at times to partner Rodri, or play Rodri as a single pivot rather than playing Rodri and Gundogan as a double pivot, which he was doing earlier, he's basically given Gundogan the license to roam and sort of join attacks and get forward. And he's scoring goals. I don't think he scored what, 5 or 6 goals this season already, which is I think the highest he's had in his career. So he's been one of the unsung heroes for City for me, along with Stones, Diaz, and Cancelo. People talk about Sterling and De Bruyne, but these guys are the guys who've really done well over the last 4 or 5 weeks, or maybe even a bit longer. And yeah, as you said, City have crept up the table. They're in second place. They have a game in hand. If they win that, they go top. They go a point ahead of United, and they were, I think, in 5th or 6th place about a month and a half back. So they've put together a really good run. They've conceded just 1 goal in the last 9 games, coincidentally since the time John Stones came into the team. So Stones is keeping out Aymeric Laporte and he's formed a very good partnership with Rodri at the back. So City have the best defensive record in the league. They've looked like they've gotten over the creativity issues that we sort of highlighted about 3 or 4 weeks ago. They've scored a bunch of goals since then against the likes of Chelsea and United. So yeah, I mean, we spoke earlier about potential title contenders, I think, and I'm going to say that I think City are going to be the team to beat and not Liverpool, because it just looks like they've got their act together a bit more than Liverpool at this point of time.
So I guess a couple notes. I think you're spot on. Their expected goals for that game was only 1.92, and they scored 4 goals. They had 13 shots total, of which 6 were on target and 4 went in. So they were very, very efficient. Trey, what I want to ask you is, what's your take on Jesus? Stones has got as many goals as Jesus does this season, and we know that Jesus has been out due to some injuries. But what is it, and how does he get his mojo back?
It's tough. I mean, in the beginning, obviously, you want a consistent run of games. You want to be able to be out on the pitch. But for a striker, the most important thing is scoring goals, obviously. And I think sometimes that could be, to their demise, because their main and sole focus is on scoring goals so much that sometimes other things seem to suffer. But he's obviously very talented. He's proven that he can score goals, and I think it's just a slump that he'll work his way out of. And at the end of the day, Manchester City is a team. They've paid big money for some of the players they have, and I think a lot of the time that's what will bail them out, that individual brilliance. So, when Harshal talks about the goals they've scored, they're all from set pieces, but they're all, individually brilliant goals. I mean, Gundogan puts his in the top corner, Sterling puts his in the top corner, De Bruyne's delivery, those are all things that you have to look at that will bail them out. So I think, I agree, City's the team to beat for sure. I think they're going to, they've figured it out. I think they're in a good run of form. I think they're going to continue. They've got Villa, who hasn't played since, I think, around New Year's, like a full strength team. I think that was the last time that they fully played. So I don't know if we'll get a rested Villa ready to run City into the ground, or if we'll get a rusty Villa who might allow a few goals in. But that'll be interesting for City. And then their schedule lightens up a bit. They've got I think West Brom, they've got Sheffield United, and I think they've got Burnley. So, I mean, they're going to look to really force the issue and extend their lead at the top of the table should they get it. So, yeah, I really like them as favorites for the Premier League.
Good. Let's turn our attention, just some quick thoughts, Harshal, on Tottenham, Sheffield United.
Sheffield United had a little bit of a revival. They won their first game of the season a couple of weeks ago. Then they won in the FA Cup, and that could have been a little bit of a springboard for them. I was surprised that Mourinho went with a back three in this game. He sort of tried to match Sheffield United's shape, which I thought was giving. I mean, no offense or no disrespect to Sheffield United, but I didn't think there was a need for him to match Sheffield United's shape in order to try and beat them. But I mean, Spurs got the job done anyway. And again, it's the Son and Kane combo. Even though they didn't assist one another for a goal, but Son got Kane obviously scored a goal, and Tanguy Ndombele's goal was absolutely fantastic. I do think he meant that goal, and it was an absolutely fantastic lob to be able to get it into the net from that sort of angle is brilliant, and he is going to be a very important player for Spurs. As much as Kane and Son are getting the goals, he's the guy who supplies a lot of the creativity. He's excellent with the ball at his feet in terms of being able to dribble past players. He's very press resistant in that sense. He's able to sort of his turning ability on the ball is excellent. I mean, you just need to watch him turn and feint and get away with the ball and leave a couple of players behind. And that's a very, I mean, I'd say that's a very rare quality for a central midfielder. You usually see that sort of thing with wingers. So in essence, Spurs are up to 5th now, and I do expect them to be able to mount a challenge for the top 4. Again, as with United and Leicester and some of the other teams who we think might be in the title race, we'll have to wait and see for 10 games more in terms of points. But Mourinho's basically got them playing the way he wants them to play. He's got 2 very efficient strikers at the moment in Kane and Son who are scoring goals, even though it may from chances which other players may not put away. So as long as that keeps working, they've definitely got a chance.
Good. How about in terms of Chelsea and Fulham? Chelsea was able to squeak out a 1-0 win. Trey, any notes on the Lampard Rubik's Cube of who the better 11 is, and what happens here?
Well, obviously Chelsea's been struggling recently. We've noticed that, and a lot of it has to do with, like you said, Lampard trying to figure out what his best 11 is. Honestly, I have no idea. I watch. I have my opinions. I still like Giroud. I like Giroud up front. He started him in this game, but again, they struggled. So it's something that he'll need to figure out, and very quickly. Otherwise, I think Chelsea will continue to struggle and probably slip even further down the table just with the recent results. I mean, this is their first win in the last, I think, 4 games or something like that. And that's quite frankly just not good enough for a team of their caliber. So it'll be very interesting to see what kind of changes he continues to make, and hopefully he can figure something out within the next couple of games. Right.
Harshal, let's turn our attention to Leeds Brighton. Leeds lost 1-0, and I think most folks, it seems like half the neutrals desperately want them to win and the other half want them to lose because they're being too naive. I actually thought Brighton put together a really good tactical game plan. What were your thoughts on the match?
Yeah, I mean, we've spoken earlier about Brighton probably being one of the most unlucky teams in the league. I mean, if you look at a bunch of metrics, expected points, expected goals against, all of those sort of things, Brighton should be, forget mid-table, they should be in the top 4, top 5 if their actual results and the goals they've scored and conceded were in line with those metrics. But I mean, it's an old saying that a lot of people use when they're trying to sort of disprove analytics in football, which is that football is not played on spreadsheets, which is true. but those numbers can give us a lot of insight. And with Brighton, I mean, I have been a huge fan of Graham Potter from the time he was appointed last season. Because he's basically overhauled the style of play completely. It was a very defensive, counter-attacking approach that was how Brighton played under Chris Hughton before Potter came in, and he's established a progressive style of play where Brighton want to have the ball. They have players capable of playing in multiple positions, and they change positions and formations fluidly between games. And within games, So that's all very good. And I mean, it's a similar sort of thing with Leeds as well. They're again a very progressive team, easy to watch on the eye, exciting to watch. But this game, I thought, was, I think for Leeds, I think I think in my opinion, the only the second game, in my opinion, where they've absolutely not been up to it this season. The first one was the game they lost to Chelsea at Stamford Bridge, 3-1. This is the second game this season where I've seen Leeds, and it looked like they were off the pace physically, tactically, mentally. I think the pitch also played a huge part. The pitch at Ellen Road was, I think, horrible. And I mean, not that Leeds had anything to do with it. The weather in England has just been such that it's affected the quality of pitches. So, but that meant that the quick sort of passing game that both teams like to play was a little bit difficult, because the pitch was the ball was holding up and it was difficult to play at a quick tempo. But the move actually that Brighton put together for their goal was really good. And as I said, I've been really impressed with some of the work they've done. It was only their second win of the season, their third win of the season. So Graham Potter will be hoping that their luck can sort of begin to now turn a little more, and they can go a little bit further away from the relegation spots.
Yeah, I will tell you that just on particular that goal, it was just, as a former keeper, you see a back do one shoulder check, figure out where the striker is, and then just continue to stare at the ball. And this striker pretty much just moves right in there. I mean, it was just like, I counsel all young keepers, make sure your defenders follow your player to the end line or when the play is over. And I know that's so hard to do. It's so tempting to look at the ball. Dre, any thoughts on Leeds, Brighton? Any matchups they're going to be having going forward?
Well, just start by saying those are two teams who I think play really, really well, and it's unfortunate to see that they're not getting the results that they like to get. But in terms of future matchups, I mean, Leeds has Leicester coming up soon after Newcastle. Leicester will be tough. Everton will be tough. And then they've got Palace and Arsenal. So I think those are games that, again, they'll probably struggle to really get points out of. But, it'll just come down to the day, as it has with most of their previous games. And then as far as Brighton goes, they've got an FA Cup game coming up. And then they have Fulham, Spurs, Liverpool. So those will probably be tough for them as well. But, like I said, they're two teams that play really well, that we enjoy watching play. So hopefully they get enough results to stay in the Premier League.
Super. Well, let's highlight a couple of teams that deserve some extra love. And those are teams that are a little lower in the table. We chatted just a bit about Crystal Palace. They had a really tough go against Man City. Harshal, what do you see the Crystal Palace is at 13th place right now. They're not scoring many goals. They've given up 33 goals. They've got a -11 differential, and they're still in 13th place. Do you have a sense that they're doing okay? And, the Mercurial Zaha, what's the role that he's going to be playing in the last 20 games of the season?
Palace over the last couple of seasons or even longer have basically been reliant on Wilfried Zaha for all of their attacking play. He was injured for the game against City on the weekend, and I'm not saying that had an effect in terms of the result. I mean, I'm sure that even if Zaha had played, it's not like Palace would have created a bucket load of chances, but they might have been able to maybe create a bit more on the counter attack or make a bit more of some promising situations that might have developed during the game. So Zaha is the absolute talisman of that club. Although they have brought in Eberechi Eze from Queen's Park Rangers over the summer, and he is another exciting young attacker who can and has shown flashes of his quality, but it is his first season in the Premier League, so you can't really expect him to come in and straight away be able to take on the responsibility of being one of the two players who is responsible for all of the creativity in this side. So they will struggle to score goals. That there's no question about that. But the remit under Roy Hodgson since he's been manager has been to keep Palace in the Premier League, and he succeeded at it so far. His contract is up at the end of this season, and I don't think it's going to be renewed, or for a couple of reasons. I think Hodgson's obviously getting on in terms of age. He is the oldest Premier League manager, and I think Palace now do want to move on to someone else who can maybe bring a little more, a bit more of a progressive style of play, because they've been playing this sort of counter-attacking style, reliant on Zaha and maybe a couple of other players to score the goals, but staying tight and picking up wins against the teams around them to stay in the Premier League. That's basically been how they've stayed in the Premier League, and that's brilliant because it's worked for them. And I think it'll work for them this season as well, because frankly, I think there are a bunch of teams who are playing a lot worse than they are, who will be the ones fighting for relegation, and they have a couple of players who can score the goals to, it's very fine margins. They've got the players like Zaha, Eze, Jordan Ayew on a good day, Christian Benteke on a very good day, because he's rarely scoring goals, but when he does score, they do tend to matter. So he's got a few players there who can score goals when needed, and they can win a couple of close games here and there, and that'll be enough for them to stay up, I think. But I think they've a bunch of players' contracts are also expiring in the summer. A lot of them are veterans, and we could see a radical shift in terms of how Palace operate in the summer, but that will depend on them staying in the Premier League, obviously, and I think they will. The Hodgson's been there, done that multiple times, so I think he'll be able to do that again.
Trey, any thoughts on Crystal Palace?
Yeah, I mean, I've always liked them. I would love to see them be a little bit more progressive, as Harshal suggested. I mean, they've got the players for it. They've got Zaha, I'll throw Townsend in there even. Batshuayi, he's been struggling a little bit as of late, but I'll throw him in there as well. And I mean, I think we'll probably see them go on a little bit of a run here in the next 7 games. They've got one team in the top half of the table, and that's West Ham. So other than that, I mean, they're looking at the likes of Wolves, Newcastle, Burnley, Brighton, Fulham. I'm sure that they can pick up games. So I expect that they're going a little bit of a run and kind of, boost their stock a little bit in the table. And I think at the end of the day, they'll be fine.
Yeah, I mean, they've got some nice pieces. I mean, Ward and Mitchell are both in the top 25 with respect to defensive actions per 90 minutes in the Premier League. So the Zaha, it's an interesting, there's the annual question on whether he would do better at a big club or can do better in a small club. And I guess time will tell on that. Crystal Palace has been able to stay very consistent in the Premier League, and you kind of wonder if it ain't broke, don't fix it, because if things do break, you could find yourself in a Sheffield United or a Wolves scenario. So be interesting to see where they decide to go forward on that. Another team that's having some difficulty with respect to scoring has been Newcastle. They've only scored 18 goals, and their defense has been fairly solid with 27 allowed. Harshal, what's your take on Newcastle's situation and their longer term viability?
I mean, anything you talk about Newcastle at the time has to come with the lens of the failed takeover over the summer with the Saudi consortium that fell through. Mike Ashley has wanted to sell Newcastle, I think, almost from the time he started owning it. It's definitely been up for sale for the last 8 or 9 years, if not 10 years. So he's been looking for a buyer for so long. He finally managed to get someone interested, and then geopolitics, piracy, it just went a lot bigger than just the Premier League in terms of that particular deal, and it's fallen through. Mike Ashley is trying his level best to resurrect that deal and be able to sell, and finally he literally wants to get rid of Newcastle, but he's not being able to. And under him, they've gone. I mean, it's they've become a club who are, very how should I say? I mean, they're okay with mediocrity in the sense that they're okay with just survival, whereas Newcastle is one of the most historical storied clubs in English football. And in the 90s they were one of the bigger clubs in terms of challenging the likes of Man United and Arsenal for the Premier League. I mean, they didn't win, but they've had some memorable seasons. They've been great entertainers in terms of scoring goals. And it's the complete opposite right now. Steve Bruce has copped a lot of criticism over the last few weeks from Newcastle fans because they've just been so defensive. If you watch a Newcastle game, you'll see, it's literally, I think, like the opposite of watching a Leeds game in terms of, I think if you blink, if a Leeds game is the likes of, you blink and you miss it, you could probably fall asleep during a Newcastle game and you'd know how they played, and not in a good way. It's not like they play in a way which is established and, okay, I know that they're going to play this way and it's progressive and it's fun. It's more of, hey, I mean, we're going to line up in a back five. We're going to sit on the edge of our own box. We're going to defend crosses. We're going to not try and get on the ball. And if we can get the ball up to our strikers and they hold it up and we can get a couple of runners going, maybe we can win a penalty and score a goal or win or score from a set piece. That's as harsh as it sounds. That's basically it in terms of their attacking strategy. Callum Wilson has scored a bunch of goals, but a lot of them have been from the penalty spot this season. And since Alan Saint-Maximin was tested positive for COVID and he's not played for a while now because of that, any threat they had on the counter-attack has gone. So, I mean, they've also, and this has been a trait for Newcastle, that under Steve Bruce over the last couple of seasons, they've had the ability to pick up results here and there, very similar to Palace, and therefore stay in the Premier League. And that might just be the case this time around as well. But they're not a fun team to watch. I can completely understand the frustration of Newcastle supporters with their, with how their team plays. Because yes, I mean, they do need to stay in the Premier League, but it's just a very painful watch. So I expect them to stay in the Premier League, but I don't expect Bruce to. I don't know if he'll manage to see out the season, but if he does, I expect him to be, there to be a new manager in place in the summer, if there's new ownership as well.
Dre, what's your take on Newcastle?
I also expect them to stay, but I think it's going to be down to the wire a little bit. I don't see them really turning their form around anytime soon. I was looking at their schedule a little bit. They've, in the next 8 games, it's strictly top half opposition, except for, I believe, Leeds and Crystal Palace, which are still going to be tough games for them. They've got the likes of Chelsea, Man U, Villa, Everton, Arsenal. So, I think they're going to struggle over their next few games as well. And they're going to have to figure something out very quickly in terms of picking up points, whether, it's a change in their play style or whatever it may be. Something's going to have to change so that they can start putting some points up and stay afloat, because in the last 7 games, I think they have maybe 1 win, and that's not going to cut it.
Yeah, I mean, Newcastle's got 3 losses and 2 ties in the last 5 matches, or 2 draws, and Wolves has been able to match that. I do think that swapping out Bruce right now, I just don't know if it makes any sense. I think when the new owner comes in, maybe you make a clean sweep, you bring in some new signings, but I just don't see how a coaching change makes any difference given the talent that they have. It's such a storied club. I look forward to some new ownership doing something with that. But of course, that's been a mantra that's said for the last several years. Our hopes go to Newcastle finding a new owner. So, well, gentlemen, why don't we leave that here for today? We are sponsored by the Premier League Guide, Moneyball for Football, Opposition Analysis plus Eye Candy. The current update is available on www.thinkingfanmedia.com and on Amazon. Please subscribe to Thinking Fan Football Club on YouTube and your favorite podcast platform. For this week, bella ciao, ciao ciao.